Hello, my name is Seung-won Han, and today I will be introduced one of the anti-racist organization in New York, Erase Racism. Sociology of Racism by Claire and Dennis explained how race mattered for the distribution of material and symbolic resources, especially the differences in educational attainment along with legally segregated schools based on race is a problem that is prevalent in our society. Erase Racism takes action to remove this educational inequality in Long Island through its Educational Equality Initiative. Therefore, this project will focus on how Erase Racism takes a role in Long Island to reduce racism and educational racial inequality. Systematic racism involves the recurring exercise of coercive power by white Americans over black Americans as well as over other Americans of color, which is so-called white supremacy. Furthermore, systematic racism at its core involves separating, distancing, and alienating social relationships. Students of color in segregated schools based on a race are isolated in education and other social relationships. Erase Racism is one of the anti-racist organizations fighting against racism in Long Island. Their goal is to eliminate barriers to racial equality, and they document and reveal disparities in opportunities through organizing communities. Their main approaches are an inclusive housing program, education equality initiative, and civil rights monitoring. One concrete action they enacted is to notably strengthen fair housing laws, which they succeed in changing. Among their approaches to reducing racial inequality, the Education Equality Initiative works to increase opportunities for Black and Latino students to receive a high-quality education and for our students to learn in racially diverse schools. Their report on unequal resources for students in New York State based on race directly shows the systematic racism in education and how students are isolated and separated by race in getting educational opportunities. They also organized an education equality working group to increase educational equality on Long Island. Racial justice forms systems and aids to achieve racial equality, not only eliminating discrimination and racial inequalities. Therefore, it is a term that goes beyond anti-racism. Erase Racism also organized a student task force, a group of high school students from around Long Island who are passionate about racial justice. The group aims to derive positive change in local schools and communities. This group is a great community to share students' experiences by building alliance with students of different racial and ethnic backgrounds and has an impact on racial justice. White families today may not be aware of racial privilege, which are comfortable and affluent. Before the late 1960s, majorities of wealth-generating resources provided by state and federal governments were overwhelmingly privileged for whites. Even earlier, in the late 19th century, African American and other people of color were not regarded by most whites during the slavery period. Later generations of whites inherited these past giveaways exclusively given to white and could get a much better education, housing, and other benefits. On the other hand, later generations of black couldn't get those better opportunities as well as their ancestor of black. This inheritance of wealth-generating resources is systematic racism that widens the gap between the black and white living environment, which generates racial inequalities and segregation. Erase Racism constantly addresses racial inequalities and recommends policies related to racism. Discrimination in the current educational environment toward people of color shows how the past segregation between white and black continues in today's society. As a conclusion of this project, inferior education in segregated schools compared to predominantly white schools must be improved to enhance the wisdom of people of color who are victims of racial inequality.